turned up not just physically prepared, but also psychologically, mentally. And you reel at first when you're told, and you realize that it's absolutely not possible. And in fact, considering I had invested already over a year into this expedition, when I first realized that it was going to have to be rescheduled, I went into the equivalent of, it's like going into mourning for a couple of weeks. It sort of sucks so much out of your life because you've been busy doing all these preparations and getting geared up, as I said, physically and mentally. So you just have to take that terrific knock and pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and get on with it, because in fact it's a very busy time rescheduling an expedition, because you've got to unwrap certain aspects and rewrap it and reorganize, and that's partly out of practical necessity, but also it helps not just your own morale but that of the team as well.
And how do you cope with that when you're, in terms of physical issues, when you're all geared up to go and then you've got to take this step back, because you must have trained yourself up to a certain point? Do you have to pull back on your training a little bit? Do you have to just keep pushing through? What do you do?
Well, that really depends on how long the period is that you've got with the rescheduling. For reasons of staying positively strong, I tend to keep the momentum up. It is a good opportunity to sort of unwind a little bit, but I keep it up to keep myself going in my head and my heart. But of course, there are various downsides, because the longer the period that you have, the more likely it is for things to go wrong, i.e. incur injuries.
Yes, of course. So you've had to plan a new route. Are you allowed to tell us, has it been altered in any way, or because of reasons of security, are you not allowed to talk too much about that?
I can talk a little bit about it, yes. We're starting in a slightly different place, slightly further south, not too much, but it was negotiated in the sort of the terms to mollify the Egyptian security and military. So we're starting just slightly further south of the tip of the Suez Gulf. So if you were to look up the Sinai Peninsula on an atlas, you'd see it's triangular shaped. And to the west side, you have the Suez Gulf. And to the east side, you have the Gulf of Aqaba. And beyond that lies Arabia for real, Saudi Arabia and Jordan, Oman, etc.
It all sounds absolutely amazing. I just think it must be an incredible journey, and I just can't wait to hear more about it. I know you're going to be talking to us throughout your journey, aren't you? We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I know you've got some slides here, and I was wondering if you can talk us through them, because you've got some really amazing images here. So let me just get these up on my screen and you can tell us what we're looking at.
Well, funnily enough, this is a polar picture taken by one of the world's leading expedition photographers, Martin Hartley. And the reason why you and I have chosen this image is, to me, it encapsulates the intensity of the emotion that you're feeling just before you set off. This shot was taken the eve before I set off on a massive North Pole solo expedition with 84 days ahead of me.
Describe it, Rosie. Sorry, will you describe what people are seeing for those on the podcast?
Yes, of course. There's a picture which almost is reminiscent of an Edward Hopper picture, because it's relatively empty. I'm in a plain room sitting on an expedition barrel, and I'm wearing kind of pre-departure trackies. Behind me is a cutout map pinned to the wall of the Arctic. And on the floor, scattered about me, are the remnants of a few last-minute bits of kit yet to go into the sledge. And I'm looking down at it, and I have a little logbook in my hand, and I'm looking deep in thought.
It is an
And
amazing image because the look on your face is so intense. I mean, this photographer has really captured it. You feel this is a really deeply felt moment here when you look at this picture. What does it do to you looking back at it now?
it makes me feel very emotional, and it also gives me goosebumps because the photographer was so clever, because he knows that feeling. And it is a really strange coming together of an emotional convergence of tides, where you're thinking about the practicalities. Have I packed everything? Have I remembered this, that, the other? And on the other hand, you're trying to push to the back of your head the notion that this might be a one-way ticket, that you might not ever come back. So
It's a really amazing image.
Deeply contemplative.
Yes. Let's have a look at the next one. This, to me, just looks like a romantic painting. When I talk about, I mean, as in the Romanticism era, with these tiny little images and this huge geography kind of lesson all around them. What are we looking at here?
Well, it's interesting because this represents the sense of timelessness to desertscapes, whether they're frozen or whether they're sandy or gritty.
Right.
And the way that my team and myself and the accompanying Bedouin will be traveling over the Sinai will be much the same, largely unchanged from this particular photograph, because we'll actually not be riding our camels, we'll be leading them, and they'll be bearing the load. But it'll be very much in a similar style, very basic. And in fact, we'll probably be wearing very much what the Bedouin wear as well, interestingly, sort of loose cotton garb, etc.
Yeah, it's a really incredible landscape, but the barrenness is what really stands out here. And so what an extreme from Arctic exploration to desert exploration.
Well, desert is fascinating because when you first look at it, it looks a relatively blank canvas. But the more you become familiar with it and develop more of an intimate relationship, the more you see in it and the more you can read from it, the more it talks to you and tells you, whether it's the colors, whether it's the sounds, whether it's the smells. You have to, people shouldn't go out and conquer these places. They should go out there and tune in and forge and develop their relationship with that environment, not to see it with hostility or see it as hostile or threatening, but to befriend it.
It is a really striking image, and the colours, as you say, really stand out. I was just wondering, when you come back and you're back in your everyday life, back in the UK, what do you miss most about this kind of desert landscape, or whatever landscape you've recently been in?
I think when you come back, it's very stressful, actually. You feel rather brittle because you suddenly realize how very crowded our reality is here. It's busy, it's fast, it's noisy. People seem to stand very close, and people also expect you to do an awful lot of things all at the same time, and you're not used to that. You're used to your life being distilled down to survival and continuing. And your stresses on an expedition in many respects are much more healthy in a way. You're thinking about, or you might be worrying about, but it's a clean sort of concern about where the next water source is going to be and how you're going to eke out the rations and XYZ. Much more
Do you
agreeable.
find that you become quite meditative when you're on your expedition with all the kind of constant walking or physical activity? Does your mind start to change its mindset by itself?
Yes. It's very interesting you say that, actually, because it's incredibly so on Antarctica, where you get huge stretches of almost monotonous sort of skiing, but you have to be almost childlike in your imagination and have the enjoy and employ the theatre of your mind. And the people who do not make good expeditioners, who are those who get bored, inverted commas, by the end of the second day and say, I don't know what to think of next, or what's going to happen next, or you've got to let your mind go And it's part of tuning into that environment as well.
Yeah. We're going to look at the next one, which I find really fascinating. So this looks like a 19th century photograph of a traveller in the same part of the world that you're going to now. Is that correct?
Oh, well, Ben, can you put up a picture for me? Because I can't see, but I think that is probably...
Oh, I don't know why that's not, sorry.
I was guessing with the last one, but...
I might have to...
Is it the old black and white one? Or,
yes, let me just...
Okay, because that's largely what I was talking about before.
The screen again, because it's...
yes. You see, in many respects, although that visual is in black and white, which I was actually talking about earlier, but never mind, it's very similar to the more modern shot that we saw before. This is obviously an ancient landscape, and you can just see some figures in that previous shot traveling the same way as we will be to these people here. And the terrain is interesting in that we will be covering very similar. You know, when you say desert to people, they imagine Sahara-style dunes and just sand, but deserts often aren't. By definition, a desert is just short on precipitation. And so crossing the Sinai from northwest to southeast, we will be covering anything from the alluvial plains to, yes, the soft sandy bits, to the wadis, to the granite mountains. And this fellow here, and his could be a pith helmet, couldn't it? Must be British.
It could be. Yeah.
The tartan rug.
And yet
he looks like he's approaching the granite mountains.
And you'll be traveling with camels as well, won't you? But not in quite the same way. Is that right?
We are indeed traveling with camels, the ships of the desert, who will be carrying our supplies, and they'll only carry us in the instance of injury. Right. And I've done a bit of cameleering in my past, but one must always pay respect to the owner of your particular camel, the Bedu, because they would like to show you how they do their own particular style of camel care and camel keeping. And it is actually very important to forge a relationship with your camel, because they're not actually as horrible and bad-tempered as everyone says. It's just they can be short-tempered, admittedly, and I've been kicked in my time. But you know,
I had one that tried to barge me off once, constantly. Just kept smashing into the camel next to it. I think they were trying to, unseat both of us. I didn't enjoy being on a camel. I think I'd rather have been walking next to them. So I think you're doing an absolutely correct decision there.
Well, they're quite big creatures as well. I mean, these are dromedaries, which are the one-humped variety, as opposed to the Bactrian camels, which are the shaggier double-humped variety, which I think slightly gentler in nature. But the dromedaries can be quite, let's say, proud.
Yes, well, good for
and
them.
You have to be careful not to offend them, because they're perfectly capable, if you're standing in front of them, of throwing up all over you.
They're probably sick of humans, aren't they? They probably think, look, this is our landscape. What are you doing here? You're not equipped exactly. You don't store your own water. What's wrong with you? Let's move on to this. This is an amazing manuscript. What is this gorgeous manuscript?
Well, this is along our route towards the beginning of the final stretch is a great cultural treat in store, which is more of a sort of well-known spot. It's St. Catherine's Monastery and Mount Sinai. And we're going to dedicate a couple of days to this particular location. Because I'm going to give another interview with Humphrey to you all when we get there. And B, it is steeped in cultural history, because St. Catherine's is probably the world's oldest continuously inhabited Christian monastery, and certainly the world's oldest continually operating library, with some unique and extremely rare works, both books and icons, some of the early Christian icons. And everything was allowed to be kept safely there in times of warfare. So everyone used to bring their religious treasures there to be kept safe. And of course, the burning bushes there as well. We mustn't forget Moses' burning bush.
Absolutely.
And it'll be interesting. I know that we've got a private meeting with the priest there, so we hope to be able to dig very deeply into the history behind St. Catherine's and the unfortunate Catherine who came to a sticky end.
Yes, well, yes. Never pleasant when you realize why people have become saints. What can you do in that time? You'll have a couple of days there before you continue. What will be your routine once you get there to recuperate?
Well, rather than, I suppose it will actually work out as a bit of R&R, because what we'll be doing will be totally different to when we were on the hoof. Because we will be looking into the studying the cultural heritage here, but we will also be yo-yoing out from this particular point to various other points of interest by foot and see how far we can get. So until we get there and until we talk to our priest man, who knows? I'll have to let you know during the next interview.
Yes, fantastic. So tell us about this image. Is this a drone shot taken of a?
This is taken by my man in the field, so to speak, Sam McConnell, who is advising us on all our logistics and been helping studying with the Bedouin our routes. Because what we're trying to do is take the largely untrodden routes, particularly before St. Catherine's monastery. And this is just an example of a carved out river valley and the mountains, again, to emphasize the fact that actually we're not just walking across flat desert when it comes to the Sinai. It's quite imposing.
And this does not look easy terrain. I mean, this looks to me like this is going to be a serious challenge.
It makes you wonder where you're going to put your tent up, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. What an incredible shot. When you look at something like this, do you feel excitement? Do you feel fear? Do you feel both?
No, I feel excitement, and I'm pleased that it's like this. And one's eye immediately goes to things like, well, what route would I take through something like this? And where would you make camp? I mean, in craggy deserts like this, you have to be extremely careful, for instance, about traveling along dried up riverbeds, and certainly never camping there, because you do get flash floods. And that's where the majority of people are killed in flash floods from drowning.
Wow. So this rather wonderful image of somebody, are they making tea by a fire with some camels resting behind them?
Well, they're probably either making tea. Again, this picture was taken by Sam McConnell, because, of course, we must remember that I haven't been there yet, so none of them are my pictures. But it's important, this picture, because this expedition really is all about the Bedouin and their environment. And we will be traveling very closely with them and doing everything with them, breaking bread with them, so to speak, and learning about their ways and listening to their voice and to their message about how climate change is, or maybe isn't, impacting their nomadic way of life, how they're adapting or not, and how they see their futures as nomads.
Well, it's all very sobering, isn't it, to imagine things we hear about climate change and we get very frustrated about it, but really our lives are continuing at the moment as before.
Yeah, and you know, we hear about this, Lucinda, from the problem is we hear about it from the politicians with all their rhetoric and vote-winning messages. We hear about it from the scientists who we don't understand because they speak a different language to us, or we read about it in papers or see the odd documentary. But really what's so important about the Desert Trilogy and this expedition is actually learning from the people on the ground and, you know, how they're finding it, giving them a platform and a voice, because I'm sort of and my team were just expedition pedestrians, as it were. So the important part of our expedition legacy is coming back and sharing with people what we have learned from, in this instance, the Bedouin, but sharing it in a voice, pedestrian voice that people understand, and as described by the Bedouin itself. And, you know, the Bedouins have a great tradition of storytelling. And so to get our message across, weaving it into the narrative makes it all the more compelling. And that's why it's such a rich mixture to have the spirit of adventure and underpinning it all a message about the environment.
Yeah, crucially important, because these are the people who it's really, really going to have an impact on. And we're also sheltered from that. I'm so impressed that this is what you're doing on this expedition, is highlighting what's actually happening right here and right now in the world, not what's going to happen in 12 years' time or 50 years' time, but the people whose lives are really dependent on the rest of us making decisions about the environment.
Yes, yeah.
How will you get the politicians to listen to that? Have you got any ideas? Will you be able to have a voice on this after you've completed this expedition?
Well, absolutely, because if one's got a relatively good expedition pedigree, you do have a voice in that arena. And whilst after following the Aral crossing, we did have a voice at COP, for instance, COP26 in Glasgow. And the original Sinai crossing was scheduled to finish in COP27. But of course it didn't. However, we are looking to go to COP28 and deliver our message there.
Wow, well,
yeah.
Thank you. We really need so many more people to try and make politicians listen around the
Well, we
world.
need to make politicians listen, but also to capture the attention of the younger grassroots, children, schools. You know, it's all very well going off to you know, big conferences or important corporate talks or TED Talks, whatever you want, but really schools are so important.
And do you go into schools? Do you have any kind of program that you're working with younger people, or is that something that you'd like to set up in the future?
It sort of tends to happen organically, actually. Schools invite you and off you go, whether it's sort of down at primary level or local schools, or whether it's you know, A-levels students, so on and so forth. So, you know.
I'm going to move on to the next image, which I love. Describe this for us.
Well, people think camels can go on ad infinitum without water, but they do need water and they need their grain. And I suppose this is a reminder, because it makes me quite thirsty actually looking at it.
Camels drinking from a waterhole.
Camels drinking from a waterhole, and that underpinning a lot of the environmental practical issues is water and the tensions over water, which I feel is something that's going to erupt globally. It already is in places like, well, for instance, the Aral, where they drained the water out of the sea to irrigate the cotton crops. And Lake Baikal, even where I was before that in Siberia, the Chinese were trying to build a pipeline to decant the water from the world's deepest, oldest lake into their water staff, northwest China.
Wow.
And so here on the Sinai Peninsula, I'll be interested to see what the challenges of water sources are, whether it is such political ones or whether it's just the drying up of their traditional wells and water sources, because we will actually be traveling from water source to water source as much as is possible.
And this rather stunning image of a lone figure, the wonderful blue headgear, walking through this landscape. Is this the kind of landscape that you're going to see? What is the significance of this image for you?
Yes, I think the significance is that, you know, in such huge desertscapes, people often think, don't you ever feel small and insignificant? And yes, you feel small, but actually you feel hugely significant, because you realize it's very rarefied privilege to find yourself in such places, and therefore, you are obliged to find out as much as you can to come back and share. And it's really only made possible by the support of people like yourselves, Lucinda, and Goldsters, and all my team that make it possible to get to these places. And of course, you have to have the wildly ambitious idea of doing such things and believe in them as well. So,
which in itself is just genius, I think. So, what is this landscape here? We can see a tree and what looks almost like kind of gently undulating hills.
Yes, well, yes, this will be earlier on in the expedition. These are going across the sort of alluvial plains. And ahead, the rather daunting prospect of crossing those mountains. But it's captured, I think, at a rather magical time, and which I imagine is sunset. Maybe it's dusk, but then you have the night to look forward to as well, with the incredible starscapes that we expect to see. There you go.
And as if by magic, this is the most incredible picture, isn't it? The night sky, people sitting around a fire. Is this what you will be doing in the evenings?
Yes, we will, but we will, clearly that's not after. We will be sitting with our Bedouin as well, and eating and talking with them. And talking is interesting because, of course, they don't really speak English, but it's funny, isn't it, how no matter how remote a place you are, you can communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having this incredible sky to look at.
Incredible sky. We'll be wrapped up to the nines, unlike these people, because...
Well, I was going to say that, because they don't look like they're wearing very much. And I spent a couple of nights in the desert in Jordan once and could not believe the difference. I mean, I'd expected it to be cold at night, but the sharp difference between the heat of the day and the real cold of night. I literally put on every single item in my backpack. I wanted to wear the backpack itself, and we were all in sleeping bags in a tent, all huddling together, and it was freezing. But
yeah, I know. Well, I think it's probably,
how do you
as you say, it's that sharp contrast, a bit of a slap in the face, the temperatures from the daytime to those at night. And of
how
course,
do you deal with that, in terms of packing and in terms of acclimatizing between the day and the night?
Well, you don't. You just have to sort of get on with it, really. We take extra layers that I'll keep at the top of my rucksack. So as soon as we stop, as the sun sets, which is when we do have to stop, because the camels will need to feed before the sun disappears, because after that they won't eat. Mm-hmm. And trust me, I'll have everything ready, from my woolly hat to my pullover trousers to my puffer jacket, because I think our temperatures, because we're now going in a different time of year, are going to be colder than they might have been. So it could be down to -10, which isn't too bad, but it's just that contrast to, 28 to 30 degrees during the daytime, which comes as a rude shock.
I guess you must become a bit of an amateur astronomer when you're looking at the skies like that. So here we have an image of you walking with your camel, with a very prominent watch, and looking a little bit like kind of Lawrence of Arabia here. Tell us about this.
Except for the watch. This was actually taken going down the length of the Oman Desert and out the other side, and dressed relatively traditionally, a sort of hybrid of Bedouin and Western clothes, wearing a shamar, which is the name given to the traditional headgear, although normally it's also over your nose and mouth, and there's a special technique for tying it. And my watch, it's a sponsored watch by Bremont, and it's a chronometer, which means it is incredibly accurate, and it helps me navigate.
Crucial to have that. And am I right, you wear two watches?
Yeah, well, I wear one with GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, and the other one will have local time. And with my Bremont, for instance, I could point my hour hand to horizontal, keep it horizontal, point it towards the sun, the hour hand, and then the area in between the minute hand and the hour hand will be south.
Wow.
Providing you're in the northern hemisphere.
Did it take you a long time to work out how to navigate with it? Or is it quite
well, you can also navigate with the sun generally, solar navigation with shadow as well, and the movement of the sun across the sky and where your shadow falls and that angle and the speed at which it moves every hour. And then if there's a prevailing wind or breeze, or which will also create patterns in the sand, which you can take an angle on and navigate through that. And of course, compass, map. I suspect we won't be looking at a map much, because I think that at the end of the day, we'll probably blindly follow the Bedouin.
Well, that's true. You're going to have amazing guides. Yes,
they're amazing guys. I think, of course, some of them are now younger generation. So one can't, it's not that you don't trust them, but one needs to be shored up in where you think you're going as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, I think, this is our last image, and it's my favorite. So tell us what's distinct about these camels kind of just resting here. What do we see on here that's so vital to your trip, apart from the camels?
Well, incongruously, with this sort of otherwise timeless shot, you can see a solar panel strapped against the ship of the desert.
Such a remarkable image to see this camel with, with its pack on its back, but with this solar panel. What is this used for?
Well, we charge up all our tech from solar panels, and we will probably store any excess energy into power cells, and we then use those to charge up things like the satellite telephone. And we share between us one eTrex GPS. And although I like to think we don't use it too much, but it helps to let you know where you are and your precise coordinates, which is very important if you need an evacuation.
Yeah.
So
this
all
is
our,
my
our
favorite
gadgetry.
shot, actually. I thought this was so wonderful when I first saw this, that the idea that you've got these, as you say, the timeless way of traveling with camels been done for millennia, and there we have this solar panel for you to be able to charge up your phones, your GPS. Wonderful. I love this. I'm going to stop sharing the images now, and I want to really talk to you about how I know that you are about to leave. What are you going to do literally in the next 24 hours? Because I don't think anyone realizes quite how imminent this is. Please share with us what your
I can
next
tell you
schedule
one thing I won't be doing, that's sleeping. There's always, no matter how well organized you intend to be, there's always a dreadful last minute sort of vortex of admin logs, and of course packing as well. And there's a lot of paperwork that goes on as well, from checking through and briefing your team on things like EEP, which is, I mentioned before, emergency evacuation planning, insurance, how to contend with the hazards that are out there, and what to do, what the chain of reaction is if something happens. What do you do if somebody gets bitten by a snake or stung by a scorpion, or sunstroke, or this, that, the other. So it's dreadful, because you have to really put your mind in the worst case scenarios, but think through, while you're in a position to have the time to do so, what you're going to do about it. And then you have to brief the team, and it's always best to give two briefings, one a good time before, one just before leaving, so it's fresh in the minds as well, and treat it as a potential reality.
And I'd just like to say, before I get on to some of the questions we've got here, for anybody who is listening on the podcast, you can visit the video link on the podcast description. And we've got a couple of questions here. Can you take us through how it is in your household the last day before embarking on your expedition? Do you have a last meal with your loved ones? Do you pray? What is your mood like with reference to your family?
I thought you had seen the mess on the top floor, which is a sea of sort of colour of stuff sacks and boots and gizmos and what have you. No, well, I will be having a final Valentine's supper with my husband, William. My son is in Canada, so it'll be a phone call with him. And I do actually have a prayer. And traditionally, it is written out in hand by my brother Bertie, and it is a prayer of protection that's more like a mantra. Originally, apparently, legend has it, found in the shroud of Christ, made its way into the hands of Pope Pius, who gave it to the Emperor Charles to protect him in battle. And so on and so forth until I have my own copy, and I've taken it on every single expedition. And I say it to myself every morning and every evening.
Are you able to share it with us, or is it just too personal? You don't want to talk about it?
Well, I don't know it off by heart, because I just read it because I focus on the paper and the writing as well. But why don't we share it when I come back?
That sounds like a wonderful idea. I've got another question here. How many are in your team?
There's 4 of us, and then there's all the Bedouin. So there's we have an artist who some of you will remember we interviewed before, called Arabella Dorman, who's phenomenal. She's been a war artist, so she's had the presence of mind to paint and sketch in live war zones. Oh. So she's on the right stuff, but also magnificent portrait painter. And we have Pom Oliver, who's my deputy, and she's a long time companion of mine on both polar and desert expeditions, and a familiar pair of hands. And then we have the ex-para, Lee Watts, who's in charge of communications, comms, and medical.
Very important.
Very important.
One of those people you don't realize how important they are till you need them, and then think, thank goodness they're there.
Yep, absolutely. So, the team is very much made up of totally different skill sets, actually, and that's what makes for a really good team. It's what I'm weak on, somebody else is strong on, and vice versa.
Brilliant. We have another question here. You talked about navigating by the sun. Is there a great difference between navigating by the sun in the Arctic and in the desert?
No, not really, actually. It's very much the same. I mean, you think about how minimal some of the Arctic ice scapes are, but amazing that you can still navigate from them without the use of stars too. So I like the idea of navigating using sun and wind and the surrounds, because it helps you tune in more deeply.
Yeah. It just sounds really incredible, and I'm not surprised it takes a long time when you get back to kind of get out of that mindset, because what a different world you're coming back for. So you talk a little bit about your prayer. Do you have any other superstitious rituals or lucky mascots that you take with you?
I do have a very silly ritual, and it's completely pointless.
Are you happy to share it with us, or is it too embarrassing?
Okay, well, it's a silly feminine thing. Because remember, no one cares what you look like. And even when you're solo, no one's going to see you anyway. So what does it matter? But I always have my eyelashes tinted for good luck.
As a blonde, I can completely understand that. You and I the other night when we had a prep chat, and I thought it was going to be on the phone and it was on Zoom, and I was very embarrassed that I didn't have any mascara on. So
I thought you looked fresh-faced and lovely, actually.
It's the thing, I think when you have blonde eyelashes, you do need that little bit of. But do you think, I mean, joking apart, you said it's silly, it's very girly, but really, it's that feeling of giving yourself confidence, isn't it? Isn't that just doing a kind of mental boost that this is your routine? And actually, it's probably a deeply important part of your preparation.
It is a deeply important part because, and I know it sounds very girly, but, it's as I keep on saying, my mantra is it's not about the biceps and the brute strength. It's about mental strength. It's about what's in your head and your heart, and all these little details really add up. It's like it's terribly important to have a sense of hygiene, discipline in the field, on the go. every morning, every evening, people must be given their their time and their space to do their thing, because it really helps the mental strength as well. And it's the same in this reality too. Keeping the sort of basic routine to your life is important.
And what advice would you give? Because a lot of people, in the last couple of years have been through, lots of knockbacks and things themselves, talking about keeping yourself motivated. What advice would you give to someone who knows they've got to improve their physical and mental health, but they don't know where to start? Perhaps they've just, been recently widowed, or they might have lost their job. What would you say from your training that you've learned?
Well, I think that feeling of not knowing where to start, it all seems so sort of enormous and confusing, is because you haven't got an end goal. So you must have a goal, and then it kind of focuses you, like the shape of the Sinai, focuses you towards something, and it gives you the propulsion to plan it. So you every time you take a tiny little step towards that end goal, no matter how small it is, even writing it down on a bit of paper, well, you've already started on your journey towards that end goal. And little step by little step, you'll get there. And if you think about it, like, imagine you're walking to the North Pole, and you're right at the beginning, just got this massive stretch of hundreds of nautical miles of nothingness but fear and the unknown. Well, just even your first footstep means you're on your way, and it means you're closer to the North Pole. And I think that if you encounter, which you will on the way to achieving your goal, obstacles, challenges, pain, fear, whatever you might encounter, regard it not as an obstacle, but as a challenge to overcome. And the more passionate you are to reach your end goal, the more likely you are to clear those hurdles, and to embrace them, and to be appreciative of them afterwards, because you did it, you got through that one.
I think that's
you always learn an awful lot from the from those not the obstacles, the hurdles, I said it myself, but also from what you might regard as your hiccups, your mistakes, your misjudgments. You learn a lot from it. I shall make some hideous mistakes probably on this next expedition.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about them when you get back. We've got a question here. What are you looking forward to, and what are you dreading the most?
I'm dreading having to deal with any sort of politics within the team, and I don't think there will be any, but I don't like dealing with that sort of thing. I'm really looking forward to the space and the desolation and the at oneness with nature, because I feel much more comfortable in that reality than this one.
Well, that does, I mean, it sounds like you've got exactly the right job. Don't forget, everybody, that you can follow Rosie all the way. If you follow the Goldster Instagram site, which is at Goldster Club, you can keep up with Rosie's journey. And of course, she will be checking in with Humphrey in an interview partway through, and she and I will be doing another interview at the end. You were talking about the politics within the team. How much time has the team spent together, just the four of you, in the run up to this expedition?
Well, bar Arabella, the artist, we've all done expeditions before and together, but Arabella hasn't actually done an expedition with us, so we'll all be coming together to help and support her, or maybe it'll be the other way around.
Now, much as I hate to mention this word, injuries. What do you do if that happens? Say that happens to you or one of your team. How do you stay mentally focused? How do you get?
It has happened already. I've just broken my little toe last week.
Ouch.
And it's on the foot where I don't have all my toes. So
oh my goodness.
So now I can't get my desert boots on.
So what are you going to
do? Well, I'm going to cut a hole in the side of the boot and put gaffer tape over it.
Wow. Are you taking a second pair of boots for when it's healed and you need that second pair of boots that don't have gaffer
No,
tape on?
no,
What do you
I'm
think?
just taking spare gaffer tape.
Wow. So you're already setting off injured. How do you stay mentally focused with something like that? When that happens a week before you're about to leave for an incredible expedition, what is your mental process to think, okay, I'm going to problem solve now?
It doesn't waver actually, because I'm set on achieving, the end goal. And I also have responsibility to the rest of the team. So it's incidental,
Yeah.
and just got to keep going, really. And there could quite likely be far worse ahead. So, grin and bear it. It's all right.
We've got a lovely message here. We've got you're an extraordinary human being. May you be safe. May you have good health. We will be following you and holding you in our hearts. Safe journey.
That is the
Lovely message.
loveliest message. I'll take that. I'll take those kind words. Thank you in my heart with me.
So you talked a little bit about the security risks and having to change the route and things. What other things have been affected by the fact that there are security risks to this? What makes it different from your
Well,
previous exploration?
the northern tip, the line across the Sinai Peninsula, which links the other side of Egypt with Israel, is used as a gun running route and also is teeming with terrorists. So that is what the FCDO label as red zone. And if you it's on the Mediterranean side, if that helps the geography. So really, if you were foolish enough to go close to that zone, you're really putting yourself at risk, and therefore it's too much for those of us with family and responsibilities. And so what we don't want to do is make the people up in that part of Sinai aware of exactly where we are, particularly at any particular point in time.
And so this one result of this is that you cannot use a tracking system on this journey. Is that correct?
No, I'm not using. I do normally have a tracking system which shows the route, several times a day up on the expedition website, which can be embarrassing if you go the wrong way. So sadly, not this time. I'm taking a tracker with me because they come in handy anyway if somebody goes out on a separate sort of sortie, or two people, and also maybe from I don't know if maybe from St. Catherine's it becomes a little bit safer to start using a tracking system. We shall see. No promises on that front, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the most important thing is to keep yourself and the team safe. So
Yeah, I mean,
we are totally,
snakes and
of the mind that
scorpions
don't
are
track
one thing,
yourself.
terrorists or men wearing backpacks the wrong way around are a different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just want you to stay as safe as you possibly can be and to come back and talk to us all about it afterwards. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, when we had our conversation, you talked about the awful admin side. Do you want to tell us what the downside of being an explorer is?
It's the quagmire of logistics and preparations, particularly when you've got a team. Anything from obviously, first of all, selecting your team, and then you've got to go out and you've got to court sponsorship. And then you've got to keep all your sponsors happy. So then you have to set up all your media and social media. You've got to set up fiercely complicated insurance policies, because you have to go to Lloyd's to do that sort of extreme insurance. You have to do all your reports on hazards, on evacuation routes, on the embassies, you name it. I've got a whole file of documentation. And medical, everyone's got to have clear medical records. And
do you have someone back at home who's having to keep an eye on all this constantly and be your admin person while you're away, or do you have to just take it with you?
Take it with me.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, Rosie, you are absolutely amazing. We've got lots of messages coming in saying good luck, how much they're looking forward to following your expedition. You're very brave. which you really are. Is it brave or is it foolhardiness?
It's I think it's brave when you do something that actually rather frightens you too, but you do it despite, and also prepared. I think there's a difference between cavalier and courage, and cavalier is when you're not really prepared.
And because you've done all the awful admin, you are fully prepared. I think it's amazing. I'm really thrilled that you're doing it for many of the reasons we've talked about, particularly the environmental side and raising awareness and really letting people see what is happening at the front line to people who are dealing with the effects of climate change
and
right now.
Show my charity.
Yes, I was just about to say, tell us about the charity. Can you turn it around? So tell us about this, the Scientific Exploration Society. What is this?
Well, interestingly, you see, before you spoke about politicians and all the rest, and you gave me an idea, because I'm terribly important. I'm chairman of the Honorary Advisory Board of this charity, which encourages young pioneers with purpose, is our strapline. So the younger, I sound like my mother, the younger expeditioners to go out, and we help them, we support them. There are various sort of awards, etc., financial grants for going out, doing worthwhile research in remote parts of the world and coming back with the data. And we have some very impressive names on board, from Tim Peake to Leveson Wood, all the legendary explorers. They're all involved on my honorary advisory board. So we do have a voice and we do have a platform.
And what would you say? I mean, I know that you actually became an explorer later in life, but what would you say to a young person who really wants to become an explorer and has seen your work and thinks, I want to do that? What would be your advice? Or to anybody, they don't have to be young, to anybody who wants to do this?
I would cheerfully encourage it. I'd say talk to the right people and listen and learn before you set off, and ignore the negative people. Just go out there, explore and learn, but be sure to do it with a sense of responsibility, in that you must come back and you must share with a broader platform as possible everything that you have learned. And just to keep going against the odds sometimes, because it's never easy, whether it's getting the funds or getting past hazards in the field.
Yeah.
Have the courage to do it.
On that note, we are going to wish you an amazing journey, safe journey, good health to all of you, and we can't wait to catch up with you. And I know you've now got to fly.
I have literally got to fly.
Yes. Finishing your packing and getting on that plane, and we really can't wait to.
Well, thank you, Lucinda, and thank you for everyone listening, and especially for those very kind messages, which they really make a difference. So I much appreciate it.
So Rosie and I will now turn our screens off so that she is able to go and finish her packing and stop her upstairs room looking like a storeroom. Take care, everybody, and thank you, Rosie, particularly.
Bye-bye, everyone, and see you at from St. Catherine's.